Hello, welcome to Practical C++ Programming. My name is Zach, and in this tutorial we are going to start our Hangman game. Now, in all the previous tutorials we learned about everything that we need to know to build this game. And I'm going to actually spread this game out through a series of 3 different tutorials so that we can split it up nicely and you can really understand how we're going to unfold this process and build the application as a whole. So in this first tutorial, we're just going to start out by building the main skeleton, so to speak, of our entire program. We're going to lay out all our functions and everything that we're going to need. So that being said, let's go ahead and prototype all the functions that we know we're going to need. So one of the functions that we're going to need is to get a word from a word bank and return it. So meaning basically we need a function that opens a file, looks inside the file, and grabs a word and then uses that as the word that we're going to try to use, and uses that as the word that we're going to use for our Hangman game. So to do that, we're just going to call a function with the return type as string. We'll just call it get word, and we won't give it any parameters because that's just going to do its own thing, go inside a word bank and get us a word. And since that's working with files, let's go ahead and include the library that we're going to need for that function, which is include fstream for file stream. Okay, now that we have that, we're also going to want a function that prints the board that we're going to need. And when I say board, I mean the man. So we're going to want a function that prints out kind of a representation of how many lives that the user has left. And to do that, we're just going to call it void return type, because it's not going to return anything. It's just going to print out on screen something, and we're just going to call it print board. And this is going to take an integer value, and that integer value is basically just going to be the amount of lives that we have left, because depending on the amount of lives that the user has left, it's going to depend how much of the man is drawn. So that's what that parameter is all about. And speaking of printing our board, we also need a function that prints blanks, prints the amount of blanks for the word that gets returned. And so to do that, we're just going to call a function that also, since all it does is printing something, it's just going to be void return type. We'll just call it print blanks. And we're going to give that function 2 arguments, and they're both going to be of type string, because the first parameter is going to be the word that we get returned here, and the second parameter is going to be the letters that the user has already guessed, and that's how it's going to determine what blanks to print and what letters to print. And we'll go over all this in the as we go through these tutorials. You'll see exactly how it's going to work. Okay, and let's go ahead and make another function that generates a random number, because we're going to use the random number that we generate to actually decide what word to grab out of our word bank. And we already did a random number generator tutorial, as you know, so this should be fairly familiar to you. We'll just call it generate random number and semicolon. So these are our prototypes that we're going to use. If I remember a function that we might need, or if we decide we want to create another function, we will. But for now, these are all the ones that I can think of off the top of my head that we're going to need. So that being said, let's go ahead and set up these functions. So we'll say string get word, and set up our brackets, and then we'll set up a void print board, and we'll call it lives for for the parameter. Void print blanks, and that's going to take two parameters. First one we'll just call it chosen word, and the second one we will call letters guessed, and you'll see exactly why we're calling them that later. And the last one was our random number generator. And that one didn't take any parameters. So there we go. So this is the basic skeleton. Now I also want to go ahead and add some stuff to our main function while we're here. And the way our main function is going to work, we're going to go ahead and initialize our user lives. We'll call it user lives to 7. And then basically we're going to say while user lives is greater than 0, we want to do this, anything inside this loop. And basically this loop is just going to allow the user to keep guessing letters as long as the lives are greater than 0. And then we'll set a break statement in there somewhere if the word gets guessed correctly, then we'll do that. So but that's how we're going to set up our main for now, and we'll add more stuff later. And the other thing that I want to go ahead and do is, since it's kind of fresh in our mind, is go ahead and make our random number generator while we're in this tutorial. And to do that, all we do is say, string, or my bad, I had the get word on my mind. But the random number generator, we just have to include two libraries, if you remember. One was standard library.h, and the other one was time.h. So there we go. Those are the two libraries we need. Now let's go ahead and make our random number generator. We're just going to say srand time null, and remember this was the function that we need according to c++.com and the reference that we used. And then we're going to say we're pretty much just going to say return, and there's two ways to do this. You could say return rand percent, and then I don't know how many words we're going to have in our word bank. We'll just say we're going to have 10 for now, 10 plus 1, and this right here will return an integer value, a random integer value right here if we do that. So that's what we'll do there, and we might have to come back later and change it. In fact, just to avoid the confusion, what we're going to do is say random number equals rand. We need to make this integer. Int random number equals rand modulo operator 10 plus 1, and we'll say return random number. There we go. And if you see, if we go up here and we let me just comment this out real quick. Actually, I can't do that. Sorry. This is another way to comment, by the way, is with the star backslash, just like that. That's a new way of doing it, just to kind of explain that. So let's go ahead and test our random number. We'll say return generate random number, and just make sure it's giving us a random number, and it's not. Let's see what's reference generate random number, generate random number. Just gonna make sure everything's right. Oh, there we go. We called it random number generator. Y'all were probably screaming at me whenever I called it that. So we called it generate random number. There we go. And it says process return 3. And let's run it one more time. Process return 3. It's just coincidence. There we go, process return 9. So we're getting a random number every time. And while we're in this tutorial, I want to go ahead and I want to make us a word bank. And go back. I think I'm actually in this one. And we have employees.txt. Let me delete that real quick. There we go. And let's just make us a new document, text document. We'll just call it wordlist.txt. We're going to open it. Well, wordlist.txt. There we go. Open, and we'll just say, give it a header. Word list. We'll give it a couple of words. So we'll say giraffe, rhino, Ruby, truck, cricket, grasshopper, buzzard. Just thinking of random, words off the top of my head. There's not really a theme going on here. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's get 2 more. We'll just say potato and one really good word. We'll say Linux. There we go. So that's 10 words. Not really a overall theme there, but it's the 10 words we'll use for our word bank for now. And let's go ahead and, in this tutorial, go ahead and make our get word function, since file input and file output's kind of a thing we've been practicing for a while, so it'll go kind of quick. So we need to go ahead and make our variable, call it if stream. Let me format that a little bit better. If stream, we'll call it input file, and then wordlist.txt. And we'll know pretty much, since this is returning a string, we'll know. We'll say if not input file, we'll print out an error, but we won't return, because this is a string return type, so we won't actually be able to return an integer value here anyways. But we'll say error -6, word list not found. That will let us know at least if the word list wasn't found. And then we'll say let's go ahead and make another variable here. We'll call it temp word, and then we'll just say probably gonna need temp word. There we go. And actually we're gonna need an array, so we'll say a string array. We'll call it word list, or we'll just call it word list. And let's go ahead and make a constant value, const int word list size equals 10. And you can put a comment here in the code to let you know, change word list size here, just to let yourself know later, if you make a bigger word bank, if you want to change it to 100, all you have to do is add 100 right there. We'll say word list size equals, we'll just initialize the whole thing to blank strings. And then, since we're going to need a for loop, we'll use this index variable. We'll set it to 0, because we're going to use a for loop later in this function. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and do now. We're going to do a pre-read, and we do have a header, so don't forget about the header that we need to get rid of. We're going to use our ignore function. So we'll say input file dot ignore our 255 bytes, and then our delimiter of new line. That'll get rid of the header, remember. And then we'll do a pre-read, comment it there just for habit. We'll say input file temp word, and then our while loop, and we'll say while not input file.eof. Go ahead and make a post read. It's the same thing, remember, as the pre-read. Input file temp word, and then we're going to store everything that we get from this file into a word list, our word list. And to do that, we basically just say we're going to use our index variable that we created up here. We'll just say word list index, so it's going to start at 0, word list index 0 equals temp word, and then we'll say index plus plus. And then down here, once this loop is done, basically it's going to populate our entire word list array with all the words in this word list. So what we can do is, since we need to return a string value, but it needs to be a random string from our word list, we're going to use our random number generator, our generate random number function, to return a random index of this array and return a random word. And to do that, all we do is say return word list, and then for our index, since it needs to be random, we'll say generate random number. That's our function, generate random number, semicolon, and it will return a random index of this word list, which is populated with these words. And just to kind of show you that, if we go up to our main function here, we were returning a random number before. We'll go ahead and put that back to return 0. We're just going to see out get word and make sure it works. And if we do that, we get the word blue. If we run it again, 1 second, let's save it. If we run it again, oops, we get the word truck. And now we get the word Linux. So you can see we're getting new words every single time. Ruby, all from our word list. Grasshopper. And that's how our hangman game is going to function. You know, it's going to grab random words from this word list. And that's pretty much all I want to do for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we're going to go more in depth with printing our man and printing the blanks. But I want you to kind of go through this tutorial a few times and really look at this get word function and see how we're using this function in conjunction with the generate random number function to return a string of a index of this word list. And you'll find that it's actually maybe a lot more simple than you were at first thinking. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.